All right. Well, good morning here and happy Friday to you. We have made it to the end of trimester or week 2 of trimester 2 here. And you want to make sure that you have turned in the assignment DBQ, Hoover, and Roosevelt. And I know it was a difficult assignment by looking at all those different documents and trying to kind of interpret what either Hoover or Roosevelt is saying in that particular document, especially that it's an extract. So you don't get the full context of it. And so you just get the context of that moment or that part of the document, but not the totalness of that particular document. And so also, when you look at the tone of some of the documents, especially by FDR, you're looking at it's an election year, and so it's going to be kind of strong in its rhetoric. But you look at Hoover's and over the span of his presidency, but then also the first one was prior to him being president of the United States. And so you kind of get perhaps maybe a different view of Herbert Hoover as a result of or because of that. So, but looking at what people had submitted, I would say overall well done, good use of the sources, and good points, valid points brought up in the 2 summary questions. So today, what I want us to do is begin to look at the New Deal in terms of criticism. We think of FDR as a very successful president. He was there for us during the Great Depression and World War II, but not everyone is going to agree with the New Deal, at least the direction of the New Deal. And so what we want to look at is, did the New Deal go too far? And so that would mean people on the right side of the spectrum. And so that would be like conservatives or the political party, typically Republicans, might say that the New Deal has gone too far. It's pushing the country in a direction that we're not used to. And then you might have some critics who say the New Deal did not go far enough. We didn't swing in we didn't swing in the direction far enough. Maybe the New Deal had left some people out. Did not include groups, or just didn't think FDR was addressing the issues at hand properly. And so that's kind of like the overall frame that we want to look at when we get to the criticism of FDR. And so to kind of stimulate that thought there, I do have a little video clip here. You know me, I always like to throw a little video clip in. I think as a social studies teacher, it's almost like an obligatory thing to do, is have a video clip here. And so it is from that series that we had seen a little bit already from, called Stormy Weather. And this is a part dealing with some criticism. And people can verbalize it, or they can also do that criticism through action. All right, so let me bring in this video clip, and then perhaps maybe like throw in the chat your thoughts as we're watching this, and then we'll go from there. All right, so let me get this clip.
longshoremen won virtually all their demands, encouraging workers across the country to move against management. In 1934, there were more than 1,800 strikes for union recognition.
Coal miners, steel workers, warehouse, different people, packing house. They said if a bunch of starving seamen and longshoremen could weather the storm, then we could do it back in Pittsburgh, or we could do it here, we could do it there.
Labor unrest was only one of Roosevelt's problems in 1934. Economic recovery had stalled, and critics complained that he'd gone too far. The constitutionality of some New Deal programs were being challenged in the courts, and business leaders were warning that FDR had steered the country recklessly to the left. But Roosevelt knew that his program still hadn't reached millions of desperate Americans, and he didn't know how long they would wait. Discontent and frustration gave rise to any number of demagogues, including the charismatic radio priest Father Charles Coughlin, Dr. Francis Townsend, self-proclaimed advocate for the elderly, radical spellbinders who claimed the New Deal was dying. During 1934, one of these would-be saviors developed a national following and presidential ambitions. He was called the Kingfish. Senator and former Louisiana Governor Huey Long.
After we told you people that Hoover was a numbskull.
The best entertainment you had was when Huey came to town to speak.
They put it in to plow up the third row of cotton.
Everybody went to hear him, whether they were for him or against him. He was marvelous.
The Lord has answered the prayer. He has called the barbecue.
He used such expressive language.
He said
You just had to listen.
And when people listened, many discovered they liked what they heard.
What Huey Long was saying was that he was going to soak the rich and he was going to give that money to the poor. His plan was never really carefully worked out, and in his own state in Louisiana, he fell notably short of redistributing the wealth. But it had a kind of direct appeal that the more complex programs of the New Deal lacked, and also provided a focus for the animus against the rich that had been building during the years of the Great Depression.
Long promised every American a house, a car, a radio. In return, he wanted power. Absolute power.
You couldn't do anything in Louisiana unless you got his okay. He was vicious. And if you told him no, he'd knock you down.
He had built up a private police force. He had shown his contempt for the democratic processes, and that created a great deal of worry in Washington.
Not just Southerners, but Midwestern farmers and New York factory workers were joining Long's Share Our Wealth clubs. By 1935, Franklin Roosevelt was privately calling Huey Long the most dangerous man in America.
They sat up and called General Hugh S. Johnson down here to take charge of that.
When you have food riots, you have the makings of a dictatorship. Don't think you wouldn't do it too. You might vote the wrong way. He rose on the votes of the people, and Huey Long was rising on the votes of the people too.
Huey Long never got the chance to run for president. He was cut down by an assassin in September 1935. By then, President Roosevelt was hard at work on a populist agenda of his own, pushing Congress to create the Social Security programs, welfare for the poor, and jobs for 8 million people on public projects of every description. This was called the second 100-day.
Okay, so does anyone have any like immediate thoughts about just that little clip here on some of the critics, on what you saw, and especially about, I threw in the chat there, Huey Long and Share Our Wealth program. And he would be considered on the left side of the spectrum when you think about type of program that he had. And in the activity that you'll be working on for today, he will be spotlighted in there. And you know, he's sometimes referred to as the kingfish. He's from the great state of Louisiana, but he kind of tapped into something that what people were kind of looking for. He had an idea. He had a program, and it seemed to provide some of that relief that people were looking for. And he was popular in the South, but also, as it said in there, the Midwest. This idea of share our wealth. In order to do that, you got to take from the rich and give it to those who need. And, you know, promising a car, a house, food. In desperate times, you know, people may follow a leader like Huey Long, and we'll call him a demagogue. So someone who has a following, is very outspoken, but perhaps maybe is not going to get the same type of overall responses that perhaps maybe someone like an FDR. So does anyone have any thoughts about that? You can put it in the chat or share. So, you know, it is about, you know, 1935, 36, 34, 35, 36, and FDR has had almost about 2 years into his administration. And you can see that there are critics going to be on both sides of the spectrum. In 1934, and it started off with referencing a number of strikes. Here in Minnesota, we're going to have in downtown Minneapolis a truck driver strike. That was pretty violent, and there will be some victims in that trucker strike. And so Minnesota is going to get caught up in the wave of unrest that's going to exist in the country around 1934, 1935. Which does allow for people like Huey Long to emerge. I mean, after all, this is the 1930s. Great Depression is global. People are desperate. And you are going to see the rise of some pretty strong leaders here in the world at this time as well. I think I've referenced already the rise of Adolf Hitler. You know, so again, when people get desperate, they're going to go after individuals like that. Because, you know, he has a general idea of how to get their country out of the Great Depression, which when you look at people like Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini, in many ways they have their own version of a New Deal, and so some people in the media in the 1930s and historians and political scientists were questioning what FDR was doing because they could see what was happening in Italy and in places like Germany and then other countries as well. But they're like, this is something that we're just not used to. So you have that piece there going. In Minnesota, we do have a third party that actually would be considered one of our dominant parties, and it was known as the Farmer Labor Party, the initials FL. And actually, the Republicans and the Farmer Labor Party probably had more following in Minnesota than the Democrats had. And by the time of that trucker strike in 1934, we actually will have a governor who was from the Farmer Labor Party, Floyd Olson. And by the early 1940s, the Farmer Labor Party is going to merge with the Democrat Party. And so that's why today you might see the initials DFL for the Democrats, and that is referencing the merger of these two political parties. The Farmer Labor Party was a progressive, liberal party, and it brought in the factions of the voices of the farmers as well as the labor. And so, if you want to look for the maybe the left-leaning ideas, that is that particular group. All right, I do digress here on that moment. I get caught up in it. And so, as you can see on the screen here, you've got the critics of the New Deal. And when you open it up, there are two things that go with it. You have the kind of like the guide sheet, and then you have the reading. So you're going to want to use this reading as your resource. And what you're going to do here is you're going to do some highlights. So we've got a little mark up the text moment here. So we are in that middle phase of Roosevelt's administration. As in the video, it talked about, it's moving in the second New Deal. The first New Deal was some of those immediate relief and recovery type measures. Now, in the second New Deal, we're gonna hit a little bit more of the recovery, but also start working on some of the reforms, or I should say, FDR is doing that, and he might take into consideration some of the ideas of the critics. So we might think about these critics as extreme elements, but some of their ideas will resonate with the Roosevelt administration and find some version of it in the second New Deal. So after he wins in a landslide election in 1936, as you can see, he's going to get most of the electoral votes, but then also he has a pretty large popular vote percentage as well. So again, vast majority of Americans must agree with what he's doing, but we want to still look at the critics. So use three different highlight colors. That's up to you. You want to use that short article, Critics of the New Deal. As you read, please highlight the following different critics, individuals or groups. All right, so, and there'll be a number of them in there. And then put in another color the reason or reasons they didn't like the New Deal. And then if they had a suggestion, all right, it's possible that they have a suggestion on how to fix the Depression. So it's one thing, to be a critic. There's another thing to say is be a critic, but also provide a solution. And lastly, answer the following questions. As always, we want to look at how great of a threat were critics of FDR's New Deal and explain. And so I guess when we think about a threat, the threat can be viewed in a number of ways. It can be viewed as an outright overt attack on the New Deal, or it could be in some ways a behind-the-scenes attack here. But ultimately, stalling or derailing or preventing FDR from getting the New Deal programs enacted and put into place. So somehow act like an obstacle. So when we look at threats, they can come in multiple ways, and but ultimately they could be an obstacle, whether it's just a temporary obstacle or a big one in which he's going to have to find another way to do with it. The video clip did mention the courts, and in the reading, it'll also highlight the courts as well. And in our system, We have 3 branches, and they have checks and balances to go along with it, and the court system is going to weigh in on this as well. And then how much of an impact do you think the opposition had on FDR's approach to the Great Depression? Kind of gave a little highlight in that perhaps, you know, FDR might think Father Charles Coughlin is a little extreme in his thought, but maybe he processed what Father Charles Coughlin was getting at, and maybe figured a way to kind of integrate those thoughts into a program. Or Dr. Townsend about giving assistance to the elderly. Maybe he processed that and integrated into some legislation as well. All right, so you got some reading, mark it up, and then answer those 2 particular questions. That's your goal between now and Monday. So as when you come into the Google Meet on Monday, this needs to be done. All right. Any questions on that? Okay. Well, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And if you have questions, you can stay on. If not, you can leave. And I will see you on Monday.